Hey, so good to be with you guys again as we're going to be in session 5 of our study of Galatians. We're going to be looking at chapter 5, and I have been so grateful for all that God has been doing throughout this series, and I hope that He's been impacting your life as much as He has been mine. As I've been studying and preparing for this, it has been so powerful and encouraging and challenging to me, and I hope the same is true for you. Well, hopefully you've been having a good time in your group, and you guys have been hanging out and eating and having a good time. We're going to be continuing our study, as I mentioned, in Galatians. And as you hopefully know, the book of Galatians was written to address some theological heresy that was taking place. There was a group of religious leaders, religious people, who were trying to go to these churches who had found this new faith in Jesus, and they were telling them that Christ was not enough, that you must follow this law, that to be made right with God, you've got to do more than just ask Christ to rescue you and have a relationship with Him. They just couldn't stand the fact that Jesus had defeated religion. You see, God is not about religion. He's about relationship. And so many people cannot stand that. There's this natural itch in every man for some reason to be religious, to do something, to climb some sort of ladder for God to accept him. Well, these religious leaders were trying to literally take these people who'd been set free and put them back in prison, in spiritual prison, to take them from being who once were slaves and now have been set free back into slavery, the slavery of their sin. But what Christ accomplished for me and for you has set us free from the slavery of our sin, and it has set our feet on a solid place. And now we have a hope, we have purpose, we have a future based nothing on what we have done, but based fully and completely on what Jesus has done. And in these verses in chapter 1, I'm going to read chapter 5, verse 1. Chapter 5, verse 1. Check out what Paul says. He said, "It is for freedom. It is for freedom. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." That is why Christ set us free, so that we could be free. And then he says, stand firm. Don't waver. Don't allow these liars, the enemy, these deceptive people who have these religious agendas, stand firm and don't let them shake you. Then, when you do that, and do not let yourselves be burdened again, check this out, by a yoke of slavery. See, a yoke was a tool they used to farm with. They would put this yoke around 2 oxen's neck, and those oxen were linked together. There was nothing they could do unless their master separated them. They were linked together. One's head was here, the other's head was right next to them, and their responsibility was to plow the field, to till the soil. And they were yoked together. That's what that word, that's that imagery that Paul is using. They were linked together. And he was saying at one point in your life, you were linked together with slavery because of sin. Because of the sin in your life, you had no hope, you had no purpose, your destination was forever separation from God. But now you've been set free. And you no longer are yoked with slavery. You are yoked with something else. And it's exactly what Jesus said in Matthew 11, verse 28 and 29 and 30. He says, Jesus said this in Matthew 11, 28, 29, and 30. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Check this out, guys. Check the visuals. He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." So we had this yoke of slavery. We were linked up. Our head was in the yoke with sin. It led to slavery. There was no hope. There was no purpose. We were people without any direction. But yet, because of Jesus, we've been set free. And Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you." See, Jesus' yoke leads us and guides us. And the thing that Jesus accomplished is applied to us. He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." See, when you get in the yoke with Jesus and you link up with Him, He guides the way. It's like 2 oxen plowing the field. I can't think of anybody else I'd rather be plowing the field with than Christ Himself. And He invites us to come into the yoke and get in there with Him And he says, "For I am gentle and humble in heart." I'm not going to enslave you. I am gentle. I am humble in heart. I'm inviting you to do this. And he says, check this out, "and you will find rest for your souls." See, slavery never leads to rest. The slavery of sin leads to torment and frustration and distraction. And that's exactly what Paul is addressing here. He's saying there are people that are striving to distract you and take your focus off of Christ and get you focused on something else. These laws, this religious rules that you need to keep. And Paul says, no. Don't go back into that yoke. And Jesus reminds us of the yoke He provides. And He says in verse 30, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, the yoke of sin leads to slavery, which is hard and it's heavy and it's hopeless. But the yoke of Jesus, His burden is easy and His yoke is light. I mean, just the difference that we see here. And as you guys study in your group and you continue to look at this, man, I want you to celebrate. I want you to reflect on how amazing it is that God has yoked up with you. What Jesus accomplished through His life, His sinless and perfect life, what He accomplished on the cross, and what He did when He defeated the grave, changed everything for you and for me, and for everyone else who will receive it by faith in Christ alone. Not in some religious rules, not in keeping some law. And you know the thing about it is we as the church, we sometimes create our own laws. We create our own barriers because, see, what Paul is addressing becomes a barrier for others to enter in. And the church starts to get weighed down and consumed with these distractions, these barriers, and outsiders see those barriers and don't feel like they can be accepted or received. Well, think about the church in America. We so quickly create our own barriers. I don't know what those barriers are in your life, what religious practices or things that you're trying to put on others or even yourself. But I want you to know that Jesus is inviting you to take on His yoke, to learn from Him, and you will find rest for your souls. Man, I hope you guys have a great time in the rest of your study. Thanks.